I want to thank you all for attending Infamous Letters, and I can never remember the rest of the title. I want to give just a brief little background about what you're about to see. This is part of my dissertation performance series. I crafted an ensemble performance that included a sort of rhetorical strategy of looking at missives and communications via the letter. The first set of letters were from parents who'd had stillbirths who are part of our history, John and Abigail Adams and Alfred Lord Tennyson. And they, interestingly enough, wrote these letters very privately and didn't expect them to become public, but they are now part of our public circulation in libraries across the country. And the other set of letters are written modern-day open letter style form addressing a single legislative figure about reproductive justice. These letters use a private style of communication or rhetoric, but use it in a very open, everybody's going to read this invitation. And the idea here is to find out what would happen if we put these letters in conversation with each other. So thank you very much. The show's about 35-40 minutes. We'll have a response afterwards and plenty of time for discussion. So thank you very much.
Chapel House, Twickenham, April 21st, 1851. My dear Miss Patmore, the nurse dressed him up in a white frock. I thought I had never seen a finer child. He looked, I thought, as if he had had a battle for his life. Ever yours, Alfred Lloyd Tennyson.
Braintree, Massachusetts, March 31st, 1776. My dearest husband, John Adams, as you and your compatriots, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, meet at the Continental Congress so far away in Philadelphia, I long to hear that you have declared an independency. And in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could.
Philadelphia, April 14, 1776. My dear sweet wife, Mrs. Abigail Adams. As to your extraordinary code of laws, I cannot but laugh, but we are at work upon a declaration of independence from tyranny.
That your sex are naturally tyrannical is a truth so thoroughly established as to admit of no dispute. Why then not put it out of the power of the vicious and the lawless to use us with cruelty and indignity? Men of sense abhor those customs which treat us only as vassals of your sex.
As the loyalists keep telling us, our struggle has loosened the bond of government everywhere, that children and apprentices were disobedient, that schools and colleges were grown turbulent, that Indians slighted their guardians and Negroes grow insolent to their masters.
Well, I have sometimes been ready to think that the passion for liberty cannot be equally as strong in the breasts of those who have been accustomed of denying others of theirs. I am certain that it is not founded upon the generous and Christian principle of doing unto others as you would have others do unto you.
Your letter was the first intimation that another tribe more numerous and powerful than all the rest were grown discontented.
Oh, whilst you are proclaiming peace and goodwill to all men and emancipating nations, you insist upon retaining an absolute power over wives?
Depend upon it, we know better than to repeal our masculine systems.
Oh, if particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no say and have no voice or representation.
I hold it true, whate'er befell, I feel it when I sorrow most. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
2014 open letter to Mary Ann Williamson about abortion. My name is David Graham Queso, and you don't know me, but you've been asking for my vote these last few weeks. I'm writing you because I have become very frustrated by some of the things that you are saying as you campaign to represent my family and my community in Congress. And I wanted to ask you a few questions.
2014 open letter to legislators from a clinic escort. I'm a human shield. I stand alongside patients so that they can access their doctor's office safely, without threats or shaming. I have seen and heard things that would offend you, even terrify you on your city's sidewalks. I volunteer gladly because accessing basic health care is a right in this country that I am willing to stand for until it is fully realized. I do this work protecting your citizens, knowing that it is not my job, it is your job.
2013 open letter to Texas legislators. All eyes are on Texas as the fate of a far-reaching measure to restrict abortions and close many abortion facilities faces its last days of debate. Abortion generates strong feelings on all sides. This is true within our own organization, the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. And we respect that our 58,000 members have deeply held personal beliefs on this topic.
2011, written testimony from a reproductive justice community. We write to you as an organization concerned with protecting the rights and ensuring the well-being of women of color. We are organizations dedicated to reproductive justice, and we are outraged by the introduction of H.R. 3541, the Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass Paternal Non-Discrimination Act, PRENDA, of 2011.
2005, open letter to religious leaders on abortion as a moral decision. As religious leaders, we are committed to supporting people's efforts to achieve spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being, including their reproductive and sexual health. We assist women and families confronting an unintended pregnancy or pregnancies that can no longer be carried to term.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
My dear Anne, he was a grand-looking little fellow as I ever saw, as large as if he had been 3 months old at least, and the doctor said he would have been very hefty if he could have escaped this accident of birth.
Philadelphia, July 8, 1777, Tuesday. Next month completes 3 years that I have devoted to the servitude of liberty, and a year since revolution was declared. Engaged on 26 committees, the most pressing of which as president of the Board of War, the last, an honor to which I never aspired, a trust to which I feel myself vastly unequal, but I am determined to do as well as I can. To a man whose attachments to his family are as strong as mine, absence alone from such a wife and such children would be a great sacrifice. How often have I seen in my dreams my dearest friend a widow, and her charming prattler orphans exposed to all the insolence of unfeeling tyrants. Yet the horrid vision has never for one moment shaken the resolution of my heart.
Braintree, July 9th, 1777. As I sit down to write you this post, I have been very unwell this past week, with some complaints that have been new to me, though I hope not dangerous.
My mind is again anxious, and my heart in pain for my dearest friend.
I was last night again taken with a shaking fit, and I'm very apprehensive that a life was lost.
The whole night before he was born, he was vigorously alive, but in being born, he died. I suspect it was that severe fall Emily got some weeks ago, which shook him out of his place.
Before this shall reach you, I hope you will be happy in the embraces of a daughter, as fair and good and wise and virtuous as the mother. Or if it is a son, I hope it will still resemble the mother in person, mind, and heart.
I would not have you be too much alarmed. I keep up some spirits yet, though I would have you prepared in an event that something may happen.
Or that I could be near to say a few words, or shew a few kind looks, or do a few kind actions. Oh, that I could take from my dearest a share of her distress, or relieve her of the whole.
I have not let Emily see any of the letters, fearing to excite her.
I should give you some background. Last November, my wife and I felt our son kick for the first time. A few days later, a routine checkup became a nightmare when we learned that there was something wrong with his brain. After weeks of tests and retests, and bad news somehow becoming worse news, we were told that our son would have about a 50% chance of surviving after being born, and absolutely no chance of ever having brain function.
While we can agree to disagree about abortion on ideological grounds, we must draw a hard line against legislation that threatens women's health, like Texas HB 2
I desire you would remember the ladies.
and SB 1, and speak to the false and misleading underlying assumptions of this and other legislation like it.
While Prenda purports to support gender equality and civil rights, it does neither. Instead, it discriminates against women of color and calls it to question our ability to make decisions about our own bodies.
I'm not the police. I'm not a lawmaker. I'm just a neighbor, a friend, a compassionate face in a sea of picketers screaming hate and spewing bile at your constituents as they approach the door of a reproductive health care facility. Some seek cancer screenings, some seek to terminate a pregnancy, some seek prenatal care or birth control. Whatever their reason for visiting the clinic in your community, their safety and emotional well-being should be at the top of your priority list.
We affirm women as moral agents who have the capacity, right, and responsibility to make the decision as to whether or not abortion is justified in their specific circumstances. That decision is best made when it includes a well-informed conscience, serious reflection, insights from her faith and her values, and a consultation with a caring partner, family members, and spiritual counselor. Men have an obligation, a moral obligation, to acknowledge and support women's decision-making.
We made a decision as a family to say goodbye to our son before we even met him. My wife had a late-term abortion. She had bravely shared her story elsewhere. I think it is important that I do the same when someone who is seeking a position that would represent me and my family at the highest level of government espouses nonsense that would have had a direct impact on me and my family.
Little bosom, noble forehead, little hands.
July 10th, 1777. 'Tis now 48 hours since I can say I enjoyed any real ease. The doctor encourages me to hope that my apprehensions are groundless respecting what I wrote you yesterday, though I cannot say I have any reason to alter my mind. I pray heaven that it will be soon, or I shall be worn out.
Clenched as in a fist.
July 10, 1777. 3 times have I felt the most distressing sympathy with my partner, without being able to afford her any kind of solace or assistance. When the family was sick of the dysentery and so many of our friends died of it. When you all had the smallpox, and now I think I feel as anxious as ever.
Little bosom not yet cold, noble forehead made for thought, little hands of mighty mold clenched as in the fight which they had fought.
This morning I am rather more ill than I was yesterday. This day 10 years ago, Master John came into the world. May I have reason again to relect it with peculiar gratitude.
He had done battle to be born, but some brute force of nature had prevailed, and the little warrior failed.
Mr. John Adams, the day before yesterday, Mrs. Adams was delivered of a daughter. But it grieves me to add, sir, that it was stillborn. It was an exceedingly fine-looking child. J. Baxter Jr.
Whose life was ended ere thy breath begun, thou 9 months neighbor of my dear one's heart.
Before this reaches you, I hope you will be happy in the braces of a little female beauty. God bless her. Pray let me continue to hear from you every week. When you can't write, make some other pen do the duty.
And howsoe'er thou liest blind and mute, thou lookest bold and resolute. God bless thee, dearest son.
I read recently in the Los Angeles Times that you once said that you support speed bumps for women seeking abortions. Put another way, you say that you thought that there should be at least 3 mandatory meetings with strangers who would try the women out of their decision before that woman was allowed to continue with the medical procedure. My first question is this: did you ever think about the real-world implications of this way of trying to prevent women from having abortions? Or did you consider how what you were doing would hurt real people? And you said it anyway.
There must be only 2 people in our exam rooms, the patient and the doctor. Legislative mandates to the practice of medicine do not allow for the infinite array of exceptions where the mandate may be unnecessary, inappropriate, or even harmful to an individual patient. Patient autonomy, as well as individual needs, values, and preferences must be respected.
We recognize that this bill is an attack on our rights to self-determine whether and when to have children. We refuse to allow race and gender to be wielded as a weapon to undermine abortion rights by decision makers who have been friends to our community. For example, this year, many in Congress voted to defund family planning, ban abortion coverage in the state health insurance exchange, and allow providers to refuse abortion care, even when the woman's life was in danger.
The ability to choose an abortion should not be compromised by economic, educational, class or marital status, age, race, geographic location, or inadequate information. Current measures that limit women's access to abortion services by denying public funds for low-income women, coercing parental consent and notification, and banning medical procedures are punitive and have nothing to do with promoting moral decision-making.
Picketers record staff members and patients as they enter the clinics, often posting the videos on blogs and YouTube with names when possible. Dr. George Tiller was killed in 2009 while attending Sunday service at his church, and the provider who helped reopen a clinic in the same location wears a bulletproof vest to work. The National Abortion Federation reports more than 300 incidents of assault, burglary, arson, threats, just from 2010 to 2012. I was spat on, chased in the street, had patients run to me for cover from aggressive picketers. Thanks to the modest buffer zone in Chicago, there are restrictions around clinic entrances, so I hadn't seen a truly terrifying level of verbal abuse and physical intimidation until I arrived in New Jersey.
We condemn physical and verbal violence and harassment directed against abortion clinics, their staffs, and their clients.
My dear Robert, I would not send the notice of my misfortune to the Times, and I have had to write some 60 letters. If you desire to know about it, ask Edmund Lushington to show you that letter which I wrote him.
July 16th, 1777. Join with me, my dearest friend, in gratitude to heaven, that a life I know you value has been spared, and carried through distress and danger although the dear infant is numbered now with its ancestors. The circumstances which put an end to its existence was evident upon its birth. But at this distance and in a letter which may possibly fall into the hands of ruffians, I must omit particulars. Suffice it to say, it wasn't owing to any distress on my part or any accident, nor could I say that any action of mine would have prevented it.
My wife has been going on very well since, but last night she lost her voice and I thought I should lose her. She is, however, free from all danger this morning, according to my medical man.
My apprehensions regarding it were well-founded, though my friends would have fain persuade me that the spleen or the vapors had taken hold of me and I was perfectly sensible of its death, as I had been of its existence. I was also aware of the danger that awaited me, and although my suffering was great, thanks be to heaven that I had been supported through it and have silently submitted to its dispensations in the loss of a very sweet daughter. It appeared to be a very fine babe, and it never opened its eyes to look in this world. It looked as if they were just closed for sleep.
I refused to see the little boy at first, fearing to find some pallid abortion which would have haunted me all my life. But he looked, if it be not absurd to call a newborn babe so, even majestic in his mysterious silence after all the turmoil of the night before. He was not born. I cannot call it born, for he never breathed out, but he was released from the prison where he moved for 9 months on Easter Sunday. Awful day. We lived close upon an English church chapel. The organ rolled, the psalm sounded in the wall of a woman, and her travail of a true and tender nature suffering rose ever and anon.
I had pleased myself with the idea of presenting you with a fine son or daughter upon your return, and I had figured to see the smiles myself of joy and pleasure with which you would receive it, but the dreams are buried in the grave, transitory as the morning cloud, short-lived as dewdrops. I feel myself weakened by this exertion, yet I could not refrain from the temptation of writing you with my own hand.
My dear Forrester, my poor boy died in being born. Had he lived, the doctor said he would have been lusty and healthy. He was a grand, massive man-child, noble brow and hands, which he had clenched as in his determination to be born. I kissed them and came away, and they buried him last night in Twickenham churchyard. I have suffered more than ever I thought I could have done for a child stillborn. I am foolish enough to be affected with all of this. Emily has borne all with this utmost fortitude. The doctor says it is not likely to occur again, if God shall give us another.
The sanctity of human life is best upheld when we assure that it is not created carelessly. It is precisely because life and parenthood are so precious that no woman should be coerced to carry a pregnancy to term. We uphold the teaching of many religious traditions. The health and life of a woman must take precedence over the life of the fetus.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
Women across this nation are completely capable of making their own medical decisions with their physicians, as they make many other important decisions every day for themselves, their families, and their businesses. Women do not need or want any government to make medical decisions for them.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
places an unfair burden on women of color that other women do not have to face. Increased scrutiny around motives for seeking abortion care. The scrutiny promotes racial profiling. By pushing doctors to assume that Black, Latina, and Asian women are seeking abortions because of race and sex of the fetus.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
In New Jersey, the abolished human abortion picketers go beyond the typical, "Don't kill your baby," and "No, mommy, don't do it," reported by volunteers around the country. Personal slurs are leveled against escorts from inches behind them by physically imposing men. Picketers demand that companions be a man, Dad, and go back inside to save your child. I watched them relentlessly chase after a husband that had tearfully confessed to them the story of his wife's non-viable but very much wanted pregnancy.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
You see, after the late discovery of my son's malignant brain tumor, and the test that we went through to be sure, and the retest we took to be absolutely sure, and the appointments and sleepless nights, the unbelievable grief, we were nearing 24 weeks by the time my wife had the procedure. If we had waited any longer, she would have been too far along to safely go through with the abortion that we as a family decided was most humane thing for us to do, for our son. If you had it your way, you would have been forced to have a stranger insultingly ask us if we really thought hard enough about this decision. Your delay would have worked, and our government would have prevented us from making the decision. We knew in our hearts was right for us and our family.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
My dear Forrester, many thanks for your kind note. I am happy to say that she was going on very well and that I am less moved than I was at first. I do not wish to have any record of it in any paper. I flatter myself with the hope that the next birth, if another child be granted us, will be more fortunate. Miss Marshall, who saw the poor fellow, says he was nobly made, and she, having had a family, ought to know, but perhaps makes it all the sadder. Perhaps if he had been a sickly 7-month spindling, I should have minded it less, but I don't know. He was the grandest looking child I had ever seen.
Scripture neither condemns nor prohibits abortion. It does, however, call us to act compassionately and justly when facing difficult moral decisions. Scriptural commitment to truth-telling means women must have accurate information as they make their decisions. No government committed to human rights and democracy can privilege the teachings of one religion over another. No single religious voice can speak for all faith traditions on abortion, nor should government take sides on religious differences. Women must have the right to apply or reject the principles of their own faith without legal restrictions.
These bills ban abortion at 20 weeks based on the inaccurate argument that a fetus can feel pain. Rigorous scientific reviews have concluded there is no evidence of fetal perception of pain until 29 weeks at the earliest. These bills would require physicians who perform abortions to have admitting privileges at a hospital within 30 miles and allow abortions only in clinics that meet surgical clinic standards, despite there being no surgical procedure involved. Government regulations would be much stricter than for a colonoscopy and other similar low-risk procedures. Abortion has minimal, less than 0.5% risk of major complications that might need hospital care.
Moreover, making abortion harder to obtain will exaggerate the health disparity women of color already face. Black women are already 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women, and they attend pregnancy rate of 60% compared to 40% of white women. Family planning programs allow women of color to access contraceptives, preventative unplanned pregnancies, and improve health care outcomes for themselves and their children. Yet the proponents of this bill have repeatedly proposed legislation to cut funding for family planning and women's health care programs.
Here's my next question. As a self-proclaimed spiritual advisor, you told the LA Times that you often counsel women not to make the decision impulsively or casually. Was it your intent to imply that a woman who decides to seek an abortion is doing so impulsively or casually? Because it sounds like you think it is impossible, you think that it is possible for a woman and her family not to seriously consider this difficult decision. Do you have any idea how unbelievably difficult this decision has been?
As through the land at eve we went, and plucked the ripened ears, we fell out, my wife and I, oh, we fell out, I know not why, and kissed again with tears.
Philadelphia, July 28, 1777. My dearest friend, never in my whole life was my heart affected with such emotions and sensation as were this day occasioned by your letters of the 9, 10, 11, and 16 of July. I feel a grief and mortification that is heightened, though it is not wholly occasioned by my sympathy with the mother.
And blessings on the falling out that all the more endears, when we fall out with those we love and kiss again with tears.
It is not unaccountable that one should feel so strong an affection for an infant that one has never seen nor shall see. Yet I must confess to you the loss of this sweet little girl has most tenderly and sensibly affected me.
For when we came where lies the child we lost in other years, there above the little grave, oh, there above the little grave, we kissed again with tears.